So this is something I do before every Monster Hunter game. I never want to feel like I've wasted any or valuable materials, so I always plan out what weapons I'm going to make. Most of the time I stick to it pretty well, but it's not like it's a strict ledger for me. I find until you get to the end game, you can drive yourself into a pretty deep hole if you make whatever weapons you have available, only to realize it costs insanely rare materials later, and unfortunately doesn't even end up being good. Since I'm doing this for myself, I figured I would share it with you all. Maybe you can find it useful too. Here's the catch. I do this veteran style. No math, no testing, just pure intuition knowing my own playstyle as a guide. If you want to know what the best weapons are, you'll have to find some other YouTuber because I won't sit here and calculate it out. I use a multi-approach system to determine what weapons I'm going to initially go for, as in the end I typically end up making everything anyway. First and foremost, look at attack and elemental values, followed by sharpness. I then take bonuses such as defense or affinity buffs into consideration, and finally ease of making the weapon, something no calculator can actually tell you. I never worry about weapon slots because I feel a good armor set should be able to be universally used with any weapon non-limiting. For status weapons it's even simpler, which has the highest status and sharpness. And for all you fashion hunters, move along and never pick a weapon based on looks. Function over fashion. Here's the disclaimer. Monster Hunter Generations isn't out yet, so I'm using Tyrannical database to do my shopping. That means that there may be some translation issues, as well as a lack of weapon tree information. I'm going to do my best to not include any DLC weapons or endgame ultimate weapons created by tickets in every upgrade. I'm also going to exclude any rust weapons here. If you find a rust weapon, just make it. They're all amazing, but more importantly, they're based on luck of finding one, so it's really not right to put it on the list. My list contains 1 to 2 top picks for each element for each weapon type. I like to give myself a little flexibility in case I'm not having any luck with monster drops. I've also got a few honorable mentions of weapons that maybe didn't make the cut here, but are definitely worthy of crafting your first round through. So let's get into it. So Burning Crusher has the highest fire damage, but I wouldn't necessarily go with that. Instead, the Hurricane Hammer has what I believe to be the best balance of damage to fire. Especially considering with hammers, much like greatswords, you really need to consider every individual hit as opposed to the average over all of them. You could go ahead with Svarog's Star Smasher, however, I believe the lower damage, even though it has slightly higher affinity, is going to cost you more in the long run, and it's going to be a lot more difficult to make. Here's a difficult choice. You could go with Despot's Crackle, as I do believe it has the best balance, however, you're going to be using more Xenogray parts to make it, so it's going to be a little difficult. The next best option I believe is Supernova. It's extremely easy to make, has the highest thunder, some bonus defense, and pretty good decent damage and sharpness. If those don't satisfy you though, I would go with Vortastrophe, as it has pretty decent damage and thunder as well as much better sharpness than any of the other options, or Keizu Thunder, which definitely boosts damage but suffers in thunder a little bit. Pressure Cooker has some serious ice damage as well as sharpness, but it really lacks in the attack area, so I would go with Cocytus. 200 damage and 40 ice means it's probably the best balance you're going to get, and though its sharpness could really be better, you can definitely make it work in a set. Your second option here is going to be Meaty Crash, as it has the same ice damage as Great Cone, but better attack and better sharpness, though it lacks the 2 slots. It's also hard to ignore Mammoth Daka's 230 attack and Ice to 24 with decent sharpness. Though it has negative affinity, you'd be kind of a fool to rule this one out with the right set. Plus, Breaker and Frag Hammer MK2 both have really nice attack and okay water, and Frag Hammer comes with a nice bonus of defense. But honestly, if you're looking for an element focus here, I would stick with Vadunai Hammer at 200 damage and 40 water, the highest, with pretty decent sharpness, or Kitsuna Stone with almost the same stats except you get a little less water and more affinity and definitely better sharpness. Hammers totally get the shaft here in the dragon department, because any of the high element dragon weapons don't really have decent attack. Honestly, it's Elytrion or bust. Bone Whirlpool again is going to have the highest damage in all of the hammers pretty much, but it's got terrible affinity and really bad sharpness, as well as really low dragon, so honestly, it's too much to fix. Your next best is of course going to be the Doomhammer Blood Weapon, but again, more Joe parts, more problems. Based on the attack styles of hammers, I would honestly go with Zuni Tail. It's got lower blast but much higher attack and definitely better sharpness. Or wait for the Rust Weapon. Sure, Black Kitty Hammer has the highest paralyze, but it's significantly lower in attack than anything else and doesn't max out with sharpness. Honestly, I would go with the Rangaratora weapon, the Armored Goat. Hammer and Poison is one of my favorite combinations, and unfortunately they removed my favorite Spike Ball of Death, so I would go with the Gypsos head on a stick. If that doesn't satisfy you, Diamaruto Dazzle is going to be a great second option with really good sharpness right out the gate. The only weapon to truly retain its immense power from Monster Hunter 1, ladies and gentlemen, the Teddy Bear. The interesting thing about really good raw damage hammers is that most of them are ridiculously easy to make because they just consist of ores. So you could max out a really good weapon really early in the game with either Iron Devil, Iron Impact, or Grand Spike, which actually happens to be one of my top choices. While Geiga's Hammer is probably going to be your long-term goal with that massive 240 damage as well as 20 defense and pretty decent sharpness with sharpness plus 2, Duranboros Felamace has really good sharpness with only sharpness plus 1 and pretty decent damage as well, so you could shoot for that too. And let's not forget the universally good Tigrex weapons. The hammer, although it suffers in affinity a little bit, has automatic white sharpness and really high damage.